misconception.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On the Gold Coast, families work hard. Small businesses sometimes open when they get back from a surf. And it's a place where young Australians still dream to have a home that they can call their own. The Liberal and National parties have always stood for that dream: home ownership, personal responsibility, and a government that empowers, not controls. We are, and always have been, the party of home ownership. Under Labor, sadly, the dream of home ownership is fast becoming a nightmare. Housing Minister O'Neill promised that she had a plan, but unfortunately what's been delivered is nothing more than press releases and slogans. Deputy Speaker, we're certainly just towards the end of maiden speech season, which made me reflect on my own, which I delivered on the 4th of September 2023. And in that speech, I reflected on the importance of home ownership, and I read from that speech. I was fortunate to buy my first property during the time of the Howard government. I fear that the great Australian dream is being snatched away. We must strive to increase home ownership. There is no better way to illustrate the collective ambition of our nation to have individual freedom and responsibility than have people own their own home. Give as many people as possible the opportunity to have a stake in our country. And my feelings on this topic have not wavered. We must strive to give Australians their piece of our nation. And I think there's a lot of focus on housing policy and what the Housing Minister has or hasn't done. But I don't want to let the Treasurer off the hook here, because one of the little referred to barriers is that higher interest rates become a barrier to buying. So your average dual income family could have $100,000 more borrowing capacity if interest rates were just 1% lower. But what we've seen under the Albanese Labor government is inflation that has stayed too high for too long, and the Reserve Bank's response has been that, sadly, for every mortgage-paying Australian and every Australian that dreams of home ownership, that mortgages have had to stay higher because interest rates must control the mechanisms that are resulting from the Treasurer's high-spending agenda. Now, we must be realistic about this. Australia is facing a housing crisis, and the Albanese government are the ones to blame. When they took office, their ambitious plan promised 1.2 million homes over 5 years, and it sounded impressive. Until recently, we of course started to see what's going on in reality. The Housing Industry Association, backed by Treasury, has revealed the truth, that this actually quite modest target is going to be missed by some 400,000 homes. Labor announced a headline-grabbing $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund, and after all the fanfare and all the glossy photo ops, it's constructed just 17 homes. To put it bluntly, a $10 billion program delivering just 17 homes is like promising to build a Surfers Paradise high-rise and turning up with a garden shed. On the Gold Coast, Labor's failure to deliver housing is hitting hard. Families are battling rising rents. House prices keep climbing out of reach. Home buyers are being pushed further and further away from the communities they grew up in. Renters are living fear of the next lease renewal, knowing that a hike or notice to vacate could upend their lives. And the fundamental problem is that Labor has been pushing demand up while supply goes backwards. Net overseas migration topped 500,000 people last year, the biggest surge in our history, but the number of new homes being built has fallen. This is basic economics. More people but fewer houses equals higher prices, higher rents, and ultimately more homeless people when the system fails. Now, building homes is not just about turning dirt. It requires affordable materials, a skilled workforce, and a planning system that can approve projects quickly. But right now, materials are expensive, tradies are in short supply, and approvals are being bogged down in red tape. And instead of fixing those problems, Labor has chosen to clog the system with more bureaucracy, just papering over their photo-friendly announcements. Now, we've heard that one of their great solutions is to freeze the construction code. But over the last 3 years, this government has been addicted to adding regulation. There is not a single regulation that this government doesn't want to just wrap its arms around and bring into the fold. So the freeze has come like literally 3 years too late. And when it was served up as an option at the last election, of course Labor criticised it. But now they've rebadged it and brought it back as their own idea. Now, I actually think, despite the fanfare around housing this week, the Prime Minister knows that his minister is in trouble on this issue. Now, Minister O'Neill used to sit somewhere right about there, not far behind the PM. She's now moved so far down the bench that she's practically out the door. And, in fact, the real measure of her seniority is that she's further away from the PM than the member for Sydney. And we all know what that means. You're really out of favour. Because I think he sees failure on the horizon. He knows that it's coming because Minister O'Neill has a track record of failing in foreign affairs, and now she has a track record that's developing in failing in housing. In 3 short years, Labor has presided over the biggest population boom we've seen in the post-war era. And when I talk about that housing target earlier, under the coalition government, there were almost 200,000 homes being constructed each year. So this wasn't some whopping, great, ambitious target that was just for the headline. This should have been able to be delivered by a competent government. But what we've seen is that this government is falling further and further behind. Their target is slipping further and further out of reach. It's slumped now to about 170,000 homes a year, which is quite frankly just not going to get us there in an environment where we need more homes, not less. Now, Deputy Speaker, one of the great things that those opposite love to say is that we didn't have a housing minister during the last coalition government. And my good friend, the member for Casey, who's a Victorian, proud Victorian, provided to me earlier documentary evidence to prove this to be completely incorrect, because just for one fact, the then Minister for Housing and Assistant Treasurer, the Honourable Michael Sukkar, put out a press release on the 12th of September 2019. Now, interestingly, the topic of this press release was, in fact, the scheme that Labor has rebadged, reheated and re-announced this week. So I know how much the Labor Party love the Honourable Michael Sukkar, and we've heard a lot about how good this policy is this week. They really should talk up the vision of the Morrison coalition government, because we are now clearly the ones 6 years prior that are trying to guide this government towards a solution. And I think that a lot of credit should be given to Michael Sukkar for his work in this area. The Australian dream is not to rent nicely, it's to own your own home. and we must get back to that objective. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the member for Fadden. The question is that the document be noted, and I call the member for Blair.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to speak